Good evening. I hope everyone is well. How was the day today? And what about yesterday? Were you able to manage everything that happened here yesterday? It was incredible, right? Lots of important talks. We had a lot of impactful people that do a lot of important work. So today I came here and I was feeling very nostalgic because I was talking about education. And I am from Bahia, the state of Bahia, but I've been living in Rio for a long time. And before I got to Sesc, I went by a school where I studied, and that today is a university, the Bennett Institute. And it was great to pass by there because I remembered a lot of things from my past. And it's important for us to realize how education is important, and our memories end up following us for the rest of our lives. So I would have loved to have Carine or Bárbara Carine as a teacher. I would love to have had the opportunity to study at her school. And I would love to have had the opportunity to read Dona Conceição when I was a student, but unfortunately, I did not have the pleasure. That would have made an enormous difference in my life, because although I've got all these memories from my past, and although these memories are gratifying, these memories also allowed me to reestablish myself as a person, and I had to reestablish my humanity. So, I didn't have you guys as teachers. I didn't get to read your books when I was a student. But thanks to this World Conference on Education, I'm now having the opportunity to have these two incredible people next to me. They are references. They are important references in our country. And they're together here today. That's incredible, isn't it? So forgive me because I started talking, but I was feeling very emotional. I didn't do my audio description. I am a black person with dreadlocks. I'm using black glasses. I've got a blue button-up shirt, white pants, black sneakers, and I'm sitting on my wheelchair because I have this disability. I'm also using the necklace with a pendant that's basically a person sitting on their wheelchair. So before giving the floor to our colleagues, I would just like to share a message with you. Priscilla, what did you say to me before? Right, so there's a filter on Instagram, and all you have to do is you access the Sesc Instagram account, and you can record a video, and you can take a picture, and basically you can record your presence at this event. So now I would like to give the floor to our guests, because now we have a roundtable about Black intellectualism, and we have Ms. Conceição Evaristo and Dr. Bárbara Carine. And this session will be mediated by Oberin Odara. So I hope you have a great evening. Thank you. Good evening. I'm even a little bit lost in the program. Because 2 seconds before I left, I said to Conceição and to Bárbara that my heart was going to come out of my mouth. And Conceição told me to swallow my heart back. I'm holding my emotions here. I'm doing my best. But anyway, I'm just going to say some things to start the evening. So, welcome everyone. And I'm sorry if I skip some words. I'm just feeling very emotional. So welcome to the second day of the 4th edition of the Sesc Conference on Education, which happens between the days of the 25th and 27th of October, both online and on site. So my name is Oberin Odara. I'm a social worker. I have a master's degree in social policy from the University of Brasília, and I'm also a PhD candidate in philosophy at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. I've been a columnist at Glamour magazine since 2020, and I'm the general manager of the team at Studio Cria, a studio which promotes the black and peripheral territorialization of the virtual space based on ancestrality as innovation. Now I'm going to do my audio description. So I'm obedient. I'm using a green skirt. I'm a black woman with light skin. I have some makeup. I also have green heels. I'm using green heels, and that's it. So you came from many different places and areas, and I hope that what we share with you here today may affect your lives and the work that you do. Words have meaning, and words are a way to build the world, and it's a way for us to challenge the status quo. And I hope that you are able to think about education, not only in a strict sense of the word, but we have to think about how this affects our work, our relation to our body and our image. When we're in our rooms, we understand the effect of racism. So I hope we can share this message with everyone. So considering all of this, I would now like to introduce our guests. So we've got here a researcher in the area of comparative literature, who's also a linguist, an Afro-Brazilian writer, who was recognized as Literary Person of the Year by the 2019 Jabuti Award, and she also won the 2015 Jabuti Prize. She's one of the most influential writers of the Brazilian postmodernist movement, and writing poetry, novels, tales, and essays. Who is this person? It's Conceição Evaristo. I want to be as elegant as she. Now, I'd like to call on stage an academic with a master's and PhD in chemistry education from the Federal University of Bahia. She holds a professorship in basic education at the Institute of Advanced Studies at the University of São Paulo. She's also an adjunct professor and vice director of the Chemistry Institute at the Federal University of Bahia. And she's the author of a few books, such as Decolonizing Knowledge, Black Women in Science, The Black History of Things, 50 Scientific Technological Inventions Created Black People, and How to Be an Anti-Racist Educator. So I would like to present you Bárbara Carine. Okay, so to start a conversation and to have everybody thinking and working in communion, I would like to raise some issues because we're talking about awakening awareness. And I think that a good way for us to raise awareness with adults who have already solidified some ways of thinking, I think the way we can challenge this is by asking questions. Because by asking questions, we can challenge what we consider to be truths. So what do you think we would be like today without Black women? Where would we be today without what was produced by Black people and the original inhabitants of our country? A lot of times, you know, we attack a lot of what is produced by these people. And what would the white families be without Black people? What would Brazilian spices and seasoning be without Black women? And what would we be like, the children of these black people? What would we be like without these people? What would we learn about the future and about love and about all of the beautiful things of life? I don't see a future or a past without black women as important players in this world. And so the original inhabitants and black people, they become important subjects in our history, not because it's our responsibility to do this, but rather because we have to consider them. We produce life and many different types of lives. We produce life by dancing. Wherever we go, the black people of the African diaspora end up dancing because that's a way of existing. And we are also producing theories. Everyone is in some way producing theories. Theories are not just a concept, a practice that's exercised by only a group of people that have the necessary intellect for that. This isn't just produced by people who studied, had access to what we consider to be classic knowledge. So in considering all of these issues, black people, my people, we are everywhere. We live in the black world, in the white world, in the slums, in the alleys. And all of this remains with us. And this is reflected in samba and jazz, in our writing. This results in the food that we produce. And so, black women, so black people have a unique perspective about the world. They have a complex way of seeing things, a contradictory way of seeing things. And not everyone can realize this way of understanding things. That's because white people only live in their white world. And this is a very limited experience. The European experience is very limited. The white experience is limited. The South Zone of Rio de Janeiro is very limited because it only provides a very specific type of experience. And that's not the kind of experience that we black women live through. And when we think about all of this, I think Conceição is able to enlighten us with concepts and with her own living, because this is about the body of black women. So let's start with that. Good evening to everyone. I would like to thank Sesc for giving me this opportunity. It's great to be amongst professors and youngsters thinking about education. This pleases me enormously. My whole life I've been working as a teacher and as a professor. I've always been an elementary education teacher. After I finished my master's, I continued working with children. That gives me a lot of pleasure. I would like to ask your permission to call you girls, but I don't want to make it seem like to make it sound like your children. It's just that I want to welcome you. I choose who my nephews are. I choose who my grandchildren are. In Brazilian society, we have this imagination about what the black woman is. The black woman is the black mother. And I can be the black mother, the black grandmother, but I will choose who I will relate to and who my descendants will be. So when I call you girls, that means that I chose you as my descendants. And by doing that, I'm able to do more, because when I see young people speaking today, I can say that young people can verbalize and theorize regarding topics that people such as me have been trying to do for a while, but never really had the opportunity to theorize. So you create theories about what you observe. And all of this is based on your ancestry.
And I also need to say this, because we talk about new ways of thinking, intellectualisms, and black ones too, and also from the perspective of women. This year, when I was given this award of being the Intellectual of the Year, it made me think a lot, because this award started in 1962, so, well, I think that's the right year. And it was the first time that a black woman had been recognized with this award. And I always say that it's not interesting to be the first, but to open new perspectives. And when we think about this very delayed recognition, and I'm not being ungrateful, obviously, I was very happy about this. Oh, and I've forgotten to give my audio description, so I'll do that in a moment. That's reminded me. But this very belated recognition doesn't satisfy us in some way, but it also makes us question why women who preceded me, black women from whom I've learned so much, were not recognized in this way. I'm thinking about Beatriz Nascimento, Neuza Santos. They were already there teaching us, and they weren't award winners. So every award that we receive, we need to realize that this helps our self-esteem, but it makes us question why for us black women, why for us black people generally, whether men or women, this recognition is so belated. So the fact that I have been recognized and awarded as a black intellectual woman doesn't end here. There are many other women should be awarded. So we shouldn't think that justice has been done by one of us only being recognized. So I'm a black woman. I'm going to be 77 years old next month, and I like to say my age. So my hair, I wouldn't say is grey exactly. I've got a black dungarees on with a blouse that's blue, black and white, and I've got one earring in, and that's not because I've lost the other one, but I like to use just one. So thank you. So I thought about talking about my writing and life experiences. It's called escrevivência in Portuguese, which is a fusion of the word for to write and life experiences. But this has helped me to write. So I thought about this word, or I devised this word when I started studying literature. I think so. The idea of escrevivência is the following, because lots of people have asked me about this. So, a white person or a white man or woman, could they use this concept? Well, it's sort of like self-teaching, or you might think it's a narcissistic kind of style of writing, but I wouldn't say that. I'd say the following: you can do whatever you like, because once a concept is out there, it no longer belongs to you, and then it ends up developing new meanings that could escape or be far removed from the original idea. So it could be, yeah, writing about your own life, but you could think about it as being self-fiction. And again, I'd say, yeah, well, maybe you can do that until page 4 and then change the way you're going to write this prose. Why do I say this? The way of thinking about this term is that it's a fundamental idea, an original idea. It's not just about writing about your lived experiences. There's something much more profound linked to it, which is your ancestry, black ancestry, and the history of black peoples, and especially black women. So when I use this term first in 1994 in my master's dissertation defense at PUC University. I use it in the context of poems that had been written by black authors. And I noticed that those poems and the creative process in them led the subject to talk about themselves, and it was very mixed. And it was very much linked to looking at your own body or their own bodies and writing about that body. So the poetry could be of pain or ethnic, but it's the poetic subject and the I within that poetry were very much mixed together. So they described it meant about seeing themselves living, writing, and living. So in the 2000s, in a literature seminar where I was on with Mai Beata de Iemanjá, Livieira, who's from Rio, Miriam Alves, Esmeralda Ribeiro from São Paulo, and myself were on a round table talking about writings by black women. Black women presented what they'd written, their stories. Mai Beata was just amazing. And I ended my text by saying that our writing is not to be domestic workers in the big house, but is to awaken them from their unjust dreams. And so at the origin of this word, escrevivência, is this image that brings this memory to us of women who were enslaved within the houses of white people. And remember, their bodies were involved in everything. They sang, they looked after the house. The stories of these women were all over the economy and the production of these houses and families, because often they educated the women there. So their bodies were completely infused within these houses, and when the master of the house wanted to take that body, they would take that body because it was an enslaved body. And those women also had to speak as enslaved people as well. So in the process of being enslaved, she would go into a room. Besides that woman's body, even her speech was enslaved. She couldn't tell. She wasn't telling stories because she wanted to. She was having to say stories that they wanted her to. So Escrevivencia thinks about those particular women whose bodies and speech is completely enslaved and is completely controlled. And the writings of these women, I'd like to just talk about what this means. Our literature production, what we have produced as black women, is no longer a production that will follow these same old models in being obedient to the masters of the house. Their function is not to basically help them to sleep, but help them wake up from their unjust dreams. And I like to affirm this in the following way. So the genealogy of this idea is profoundly linked to the history of black women, to our ancestry. So this doesn't mean that white people can't adopt this term of escrevivencia, of writing about their lived experiences, but the fundamental difference of our writing is this history of ours. And when we think about narcissistic writing, as it were, when we think about the myth of Narcissus, the subject ends up falling in love with himself and dies. He looks at himself in the water and becomes so in love with his own image that he can't leave that image that he finds within himself. So when we think about black writings, and when we think about these bodies that produce this black writing, our bodies can never look in the mirror like Narcissus, because these mirrors don't accept our faces. We've never been considered beautiful in Brazilian society. Black bodies are not considered to be beautiful. They're sexualized bodies, especially women's bodies. So Narcissus's mirror is not a mirror that we can use. So what we're proposing is that this writing that can be read, or our narratives, isn't a reflection of Narcissus, but a mirror of Oxum, one of the deities of Afro-Brazilian religions. So let us mirror ourselves in her, and that's where we will discover our own potential. I'm obviously giving you a big summary about this, but it's Oxum's mirror where our writing can live. And the other mirror would be Iemanjã's mirror, Iemanjã being another Afro-Brazilian deity. Because we can look at ourselves in Oxum's mirror and discover our potential, so that we then have the ability to look after other people's bodies. So this term of escrevivencia is individualized, but it doesn't stop there. So it's not just narcissistic or self-fiction. That in itself becomes paralyzed and it stops within the subject who created it. Escrevivência, even when the discourse there is written in the first person, and I love to talk about Enigma Guimarães' book rather, even when it's, for example, his books are written in the first person, we're always talking about collective subjects. So we're not talking here about Narcissus' mirror. We need to come out from that, and we need to think about our narratives, our literary narratives, and how they can support our mythical narratives, which will help us to have a better understanding of our context, of how we were raised, and our creations, because this is always interlinked with our history and with our ancestry.
Thank you, Conceição. Did you guys breathe? Okay. So thinking about writing based on one's experience and thinking about what has been said, I think this school is basically the dream of many of our ancestors. It's very common for Black people to not having the capacity to dream, because racism affects our dreams as well. It affects our possibility to come up with possible worlds. Everything that is supposed to help us to think about imaginary things ends up limiting us. And those who are able to overcome all of this, and those who are able to think about the impossible, people like Maria Filipa, they celebrate. And I celebrate too. Because I think that's reconciling with one's past. My grandmother, and I'm going to get emotional here. My grandmother, when she was 16 years old in the hinterlands of the state of Minas Gerais, she was a teacher. She was a teacher for the people of the countryside, and she couldn't continue giving classes because she had a relationship with a man and she was the subject of domestic violence. Now, I didn't know about the story. My mom completed only the 5th grade of school, and I got to university, but I didn't understand anything about these things. But I continued my studies because there wasn't a lot of possibilities in terms of work in Brasilia. And so I ended up doing my master's. And when I understood that a master's degree tells the world that we're then able to teach, then I was able to reconcile with my past. And so this is what we're doing. We're always healing our past wounds. And we're also doing this with children. We are doing this with the children that were hurt in some way by education. It seems crazy to this idea of materializing what Conceição called writing through living. This is an experience that's based on the bottle, but which also challenges the white world, the slave owners' world. What are your strategies for creating the space, which is the institution, and maintaining the living through experience? So what is it like for you? I'm having trouble formulating my question because I think all of this is so beautiful that basically I just want to have a better understanding of how it all works. Good evening. How are you? I am in a different state of being. When Conceição arrived, something different happened because we have this whole thing about African ancestry and a different understanding. We have this understanding of the sage, the village sage, and the oracles and the living orishas or African deities. So when she came in, we basically entered a different state of being. And then when she started talking to us, we were paying attention attentively. And she said she was tired. She didn't say this to all of you, right? But basically she said, I'm tired. But when I start speaking, my lack of energy goes away. So I was observing a lot of different nuances, and I was enchanted by all of it. And we were saying, and I had the understanding that she was going to be teaching all of us about all of this. She said that, if we had 1,000 people here, she would be teaching 1,000 different people. And then, when everybody showed up, she said, I came from São Paulo, so I've spent 6 hours in the car, so I'm tired. So let's give her a round of applause. And then she brought us together and she said, she wanted to have an idea what the session was going to be like. And we were just looking at her. And I said, well, you can just talk. So basically, I'm a black woman with light skin. I've got dreadlocks. I am 1.272 meters in height. I'm using red glasses. I've got a long dress with vertical colored stripes and white sneakers. I'm using a wooden ring on my as an earring, and I'm a different kind of intellectual. That's what people say about me. And that's it. So I would like to talk a little bit about Maria Filipa's experience. And at the end, there's a QR code that's important, and I'm going to want you to scan to access a material. And I don't really want to follow what's on the PowerPoint slides because I want us to have a different conversation. And we only have 20 minutes left. So, has anyone here ever heard of Maria Filipa? Raise your hands again. Okay, there we go. So, seems like maybe 45% of you have heard of the Maria Filipa School. So, the Maria Filipa School, which is an Afro-Brazilian school, the Afro-Brazilian School Maria Filipa, which is the way we're registered. It's the first Afro-Brazilian school in Brazil. It's a trilingual school. So we teach Portuguese and English. And so in early childhood education, we have early childhood education, and then we teach primary school, and we teach up until the 5th grade. Mario Zugi was born in Rio de Janeiro, but he's actually from Bahia. That's what he said. He's from the state of Bahia. So we start with bilingual education, and then we end up teaching people sign language. So initially, we started just teaching English and Portuguese, and then we started including sign language. And people would ask us, why are we teaching English? That's the language of the colonizer. That's a legitimate concern. But basically, we wanted to give people opportunities. We wanted Black and Indigenous children to have better access to spaces of power. We all know that English is a language that opens a lot of doors. If you've ever heard of Maria Filipa School, you've probably seen this child. She's the reason of being for the school. I graduated in chemistry, and I studied philosophy, and I did a graduate degree in education. But when my daughter was born, or rather, when my child came to me, and by means of an adoption, I started thinking about where my child would study. Usually, people have legitimate concerns, and as an educator, my concern was where my child would study. So, initially, we didn't have the diapers for my daughter, because, when you adopt somebody, you don't know when your child will arrive. So when my daughter arrived, it happened all of a sudden. And some colleagues were donating objects, donating diapers. So her name is Diana. So when my daughter arrived, I thought about the school. This was the headquarters of the school. And I chose the place for the school in 2018. Then we had 2019, 2020, and 2021, where we worked at this location. In 2023, we went to another location. We increased our space, and we ended up teaching all the way to 5th grade. And why did we call the school Maria Filipa? Oh, Maria Filipa was a heroine of Brazilian independence. And again, we talk about Brazil. We say that Brazilian independence happened in Bahia in 1822 as a result of the struggles and the fight of the indigenous people. And then we had this very important character in Brazilian history who wasn't really visible in Brazilian education. And that's why we chose to name our school after her. So our school tries to socialize a history that's based on a different narrative, a narrative that's not based on the oppressor and the colonizer. It's not the single story that we have access to in schools. We're talking about here a history that considers the important milestones that allowed for the creation of our nation. We're a country with 56% whose population is comprised of 56% Black people. And so the Black population and the indigenous population are very important to a school. We do have European sources of knowledge at our school, but that's not the center of what we teach. The most important aspect of our school is the human being. And so we educate based on these milestones that were responsible for the creation of our nation. So here we have our mission. So the mission of our school is to establish literacy and to have a different agenda. And all of this starts with ethno-racial relations, but it includes all of diversity. So sometimes it becomes difficult to understand other people, those who are considered different, those who are marginalized. So we have people with different disabilities, we have people who use wheelchair, and people who have different characteristics. We even have trans children at our school. And through that, we start to realize and understand. And yes, we do have trans children. That actually exists. She's my daughter's friend. She's 5 years old. It must be something really quite different and difficult to deal with. It was the mother that actually, supported her child and supported her child in relation to the rest of the family. And, and when that mother arrived at our school crying, we told her, this is the space for your child. And, we don't even care about that child's, the name that was given to that child at birth. And we don't care. We respect who that person is today. So we're a school that welcomes these different identities. And these are things that we understand during our development. Initially, I just created the school based on this racial idea because, my child was black and Salvador is a black city.
And it has a significant social impact. 35% of the places at our school are taken by people who gain grants, black children, indigenous children. But the donations, we also get donations, but they don't even make up 10% of the amount we spend on the children who get grants. But the school is private, and all the private schools that I went to try and enroll my child, we found out that the black history that they taught started with slavery, even though we know that humanity emerged in Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago. Even chemistry, which is my field, that started in Africa. Metallurgy, even pharmaceuticals, mummification, making paper, papyrus, so many items that are related to science came from Africa, and Greece had nothing to do with them. So we have this relationship with Greece, and this idea of the Greek miracle comes from Eurocentricity and this to put Europe in this space of being the old world. But it's not the old world. The old world is Africa. We are pioneers. Our history is about pioneers. So if we look at the timeline, 4,000 years, we only see 4,000 years of the African diaspora in the world. But actually, humanity started in Africa 350,000 years ago. But we only see these few thousand years. And out from 4.5 meters of this timeline are only 35 centimeters is the time from slavery until now. So it's incredible to show children this, the different ancient cultures that happened or that came from Africa, the history of mathematics that started in Africa, papyrus as well that started. But we only talk about 35 centimeters of these 4.5 meters of the timeline of the world. Are you understanding what I'm saying here? That schools here in Brazil put only 35 centimeters into children's heads. So there's no subjectivity, there's no perspective that can support or bear this invisibility. So that's why I decided to create this school. I wanted to break this Eurocentric education that put me within a lens, a perspective that's colonialist. And I thought I couldn't do that with my daughter. So that's why I opened Maria Felipe School. And I noticed that it's a place to celebrate. Diversity is everywhere. And that's what we need to do. Diversity has always been around, but what we used to do is to try and suppress it. What we do is we don't suppress it. And this is what humanity is about, and we will defend that as far as we possibly can. Because if you look at books, most education books start with white men, the figures of white men, and occasionally you'll see white women when we talk about reproduction, but you always see white. You always see white people, even the mothers are white. When you see a baby that's in a pregnant woman's womb, always white. And I thought, no, I have a problem with this subjective construction of education. There's no point carrying on with this. And I'm absolutely sure that my teachers who follow this, they do it innocently. Maybe they haven't noticed this. But those who have noticed, we have to help these other teachers. Because it can't be they're doing this deliberately. To create one unique standard for humanity. Let's leave this to the past. Let's put the blame on science who started this discourse. So I'm going to start talking about a few subjects of how we organize our years. So Conceição talked about Lélia to us. She's very important for us this year. We've got a subject where we look at ancestry, identity, and community. Sankofa's perspectives, because if we know where we come from, that's the way that we can create pathways for our communities. In the second year, you divide it into 2 different semesters. Here we've got my daughter Yana, then we've got Agape, who's not got a mask on, and Maya, and Wayo, who is the son of my partner. She is black, but because she's in a mixed race, interracial relationship, her son is white. And she says that, first of all, she looked for a school for her son, but then when the pandemic hit, and lots of schools were starting to go under, she decided she would buy part of the school, because my son is there. He needs to carry on, because I need to educate him to be an ally rather than an enemy. This is also this is a school for white people, but it's or white children, but it's to teach them to be allies. I didn't. So when we talk about Afro-Brazilian schools, people ask if it's for black children. Nobody asks you that if you say it's a Chinese school. If it's for Chinese people. In the American school, you don't get that many Americans necessarily, and in the French ones. So people think that Afro-Brazilian schools is just for black people. Oh, that's their ghetto. Let's leave them there. Because we don't racialize white people. And when we understand that whiteness has occupied this universal space, and then when we start to racialize them, then we'll understand how it is. What we're talking about here is just different modes of operating to be able to destroy the hierarchies that have already been established. So then the first unit is called Africa, the Old World. And then, so in 2021, we looked at Africa as the womb of the world, Mother Africa, and then we looked at original peoples and Quilombos. Then in 2022, we looked at our Sankofa project. We came back to that. Here we had our graduation ceremony, as it were, in a Quilombo one time. Another one was at a waterfall of Nana. And we're going to go to the Casa Angola, the Angolan center in Bahia. Each class we name after a kingdom from Africa. And then we base the education on the kingdom, which is the name of that class. Because we often only think about kingdoms being European, but we had kingdoms long before Europe. So we've got some of them on the screen in front of you. So the first year you got the Mali kingdom, then Tupinambá kingdom, then the Palmares Quilombo, Yanomami peoples, and then the fifth year is named after the Kingdom of Benin. These are our yearly projects, which are developed with the children and their families. So we've got a science fair, an African science fair, and African and also from the African diaspora. Because every school has a science fair, so we did the same. Because normally there's only white people who are referenced in these fairs. So let's do a black science fair. And it was incredible. The first time we did it was in 2021. And everybody was filming it, and we didn't really understand why there was so much interest in it, but it was what we... And it was based on the book that I wrote about the inventions of black people, and they did little models of some of those inventions. Then we have a black and indigenous cultural festival called Mariscada. Because lots of people in that year were doing a centenary celebration of the modern art festival that started in the 20th century. So, but it's all white, and so we decided to do a cultural festival to help visibilize black and indigenous art. Then we also have field work classes in places that are important for the African diaspora. Then we have different events with writers and people who are lawyers or have important offices, and who are black and indigenous. But very important that people see black and indigenous people at the front with the microphone in their hand. So, do you know that the microphone was also invented by James West, who's black? And then they reproduced that, and it's a powerful instrument. So, because sometimes you notice how. So when black people can take that microphone that they invented and use it, it's very powerful. AG1 dos Saberes is where we invite families to. Because we noticed that the things that we were teaching the children at school were going back to the families, so we decided we needed to have some kind of event with families. So we have monthly meetings as well with the families to talk about the agendas that they would like to include in the school. Oloja Stretch is about mathematics and finance. We go to the São Joaquim market and we do classes about finances there. So there are lots of different perspectives. Here in Rio, you've got lots of anti-racist teachers and educators, so I'm very proud of the municipal government for doing this. There are special committees for anti-racist work as well, education. Because when I talk to people, they often work with two dimensions. They take literature that is anti-racist, so that children can talk about these stories. That's great. They also talk about representativity. You know, so lots of pictures of famous black people like Conceição, Evaristo, and so on. Again, very important, and that's very. But it's also important to have positive reinforcement with things that we weren't allowed to access before, which put us on the margins of culture. Have you noticed that? So, quite often we talk about black culture, we talk about samba, yeah, and of course we talk about samba and we do Afro dance as well, and hip-hop and breakdancing, but capoeira as well.
But we also have Osso de Lebombo, which is the oldest mathematical artifact found in the world. It's the oldest calculator. At our school, we also have the study of geometric shapes through the use of papyrus. And here you can see the Pythagorean theorem, which doesn't belong to Pythagoras. We've got Thales' theorem. And Pythagoras happened much later in the Common Era. So here we also do, we show Luzia. So we do work based on fossils. And this is based on 11,000 years ago. So the 1500s, that's far away. Here we've got our decolonial calendar. I won't be able to read it because we don't have any more time. But this is present in my book, Anti-Racist Education. But I'll give you an example. A teacher came up to me in the first year of school and she said, "Bárbara, what about Easter? Are we going to keep Easter or are we going to remove it?" And I said, "Oh, we're screwed. What do we do about Easter?" So I went home and I thought about it. So I can say, well, we can say that the school is secular, and so by doing that, we can remove all of the Christian festivities, the Christian festivals, which are basically white. But we could also say that Easter was already part of popular culture. Because, you know, that child would go home and they would get like a chocolate egg and they wouldn't really understand anything. Or maybe you know, the boy from our school would go home and see somebody, his colleague, walking past him looking like a rabbit. So, you know, they wouldn't really understand what was happening. So there are some things that are part of popular culture. So that's why I said that we should keep Easter. But I also said that we would include the Toré feast, which is an indigenous festival. And I said that we would also include the Ogum feijoada, the Ogum black bean stew. We would have everything happening in the same week. And so we created a really crazy calendar. I think you're going to enjoy it. So here we have our initiatives that go beyond the school. That is, here we're talking about extension programs. You know, we have extension programs at universities, so I thought that we could do this for the school as well. So we've had Afro education courses, which train teachers based on our perspective. So we've already trained more than 3,000 teachers with our courses. We've got Afro Living, which is something that happens on site with 30 teachers. We've got 30 teachers coming to our school, and it's a really revolutionary initiative. We have the Avante Maria Filipa Educational Artistic Festival. So we take Black entrepreneurs to school. We include those who work with food and music. Then we have our school and the Afro Tourist program in the city of Salvador. And I remember, you know, today I saw two colleagues who know me from the social media, and they took a picture with me. And these were Black people who, when they go to Salvador, they visit all of the typical African tourist locations, and also go to our school. So we have some awards that we won. Here we've got the testimonials of some families, and I'm going to read just one. So Ana Paula is a mother of a child that's in our school, and she says, I see a little seed sprouting in my home, and I've been seeing this since 2018, when we became part of your school. I am sure that we made the correct choice when we see our child talking about all of these important issues with different adults, topics which are important for us to build a more egalitarian society. And look, we don't talk about racism, and we don't indoctrinate our children. We're talking about historical positivity. But these children, they're not, they have an understanding. There was an issue where children were not allowed to go into a specific location. And, you know, these children said that that was a result of racism. And, you know, these children were 7 years old. And that's it. We're talking about decolonializing education. Here we have our book, that's my book, that's called How to Be an Anti-Racist Teacher. It talks about what we do. If you want to contribute with R$5, here we've got our Pix QR code. And let me share a secret with you here. No, I'm just kidding. You really have to hear about this. So the Maria Filipa School is actually coming to Rio de Janeiro. On Instagram, we were receiving a lot of requests to come to the Southeast, especially the state of Rio and São Paulo. So, you know, we were thinking, where should we take our school? Where should we take our school? And so we decided to come to Rio de Janeiro because, no, I'm just kidding. You know, I fell in love with Thiago Tomé. That's why we came. And, you know, he's my partner. He lives here in Rio, and I'm coming to live here. So, you know, I created a school for my daughter. So since I'm coming to Rio, I decided that I would open a unit here. And then later we can open up a unit in São Paulo because we're getting a lot of demand for that. So in 2025, we're going to have a unit here. we're going to either rent or purchase a house. If the deities help us, we'll buy it. But you know, it's got to happen. So in the first semester of next year, we are going to create a space of cohabiting so that in the first semester of 2025, we may start the school year. So please scan this QR code. Are you having a hard time? Oh, maybe it's because I'm in front of it. So you can answer the questionnaire. It's a questionnaire to identify the location and to understand how much the school costs. So we've got some 4 items here. So thank you very much, and I hope that those who had not heard about our school now know a little bit about it. Were you able to scan it? Thank you, Bárbara. Okay, guys, I think we should open up the floor for questions. Does anyone here have a question? I think the Maria Filipa School needs to open up at Gamboa, close to the Escrevivência house. Yeah, we actually thought about that. Yeah, I would do that if I were you. So, would anyone like to ask a question? So, let's do 3 questions. Would you prefer to answer the question when it's asked, or would you like to have all of the questions asked first and then answer them? Okay. So, 3 questions. Anyone? We've got 2 people. No? So, can somebody give her the microphone? I was really impacted by the progress that your school has made. And I was thinking about the pandemic. You kind of answered the question because you talked about the business partner. But, you know, with just 5 reais, you know, you can't really finance this kind of endeavor. So I was thinking to myself, wow, this is such a big project. And you know, it happened during the pandemic. And Conceição, I really love her. We actually met each other at Flupi, and I gave her a book. So I was really happy for that. Good evening, I'm Sara. I'm a teacher, I'm a basic education teacher. I come from Belfor Roxo. And I'd actually would like to hear a comment about the calendar. We talk about leaving this Christian Western calendar. And here I'd like to mention Cocoana, which is an Angolan festivity. But then, and people will say, but isn't that kind of like black magic? Isn't that African sorcery? Hi, I'm Carlos Alvarez. I'm Argentinian. And it's an honor to be here listening to you. We actually follow you on Instagram. And my question is related to the reflection and the relation to the Afro diaspora. I would like to know about how this relates to Lula as president and the flourishing of the Afro-Brazilian movement and everything that's happening in Colombia and Brazil. These countries are being strengthened in their Afro-diasporic elements. So I would like to know whether you have a proposal for moving forward these ideas, a place that will allow us to progress with this kind of thinking and political articulation. So, for example, our participation in this conference is related to increasing the visibility of the Afro-Argentinian community, which is a community that is made invisible. So it's important for us to be present in the different institutions. We are fighting for an international declaration from Afro-descendants because we would like these people to have a voice. And it's important for this voice to reach the diaspora. So I would like to hear your reflection about the articulation with different movements in different spaces in Latin America. Thank you very much.
Você quer começar, Conceição? Pode ser? Foi difícil.
So it was very difficult. During the pandemic, during the isolation period, we had just a few paying children. So we already had scholarships at the time, so we had 19 paying children and 6 employees. So we reached this critical period, and our school still has some difficulty sustaining itself. And we're coming here to Rio. And we can't really ask people to pay what the school is worth, to pay teachers well and to offer a decent structure for children. If we raise the price, we're going to centralize the school in a dimension that's not interesting for us. So this school is private, but it doesn't really work in a private way. So in Salvador, for example, we got resources from philanthropic associations. So we're trying to understand their business model because it's not a common business, not the Western way of thinking. Because if we do that, we're not going to have black children in our school. That's what schools in the southern zone of Rio de Janeiro do. A lot of these schools here in the south zone of Rio de Janeiro charge high prices, and they end up excluding people. Who is the unilateral subject of this kind of education? Ends up being the white child. And sure, it's important for this child to get a degree, to be recognized, but we can't really empower our black and indigenous children. So it would be great if the Maria Filipa School could be a public school. And if here in Rio, if we worked with the Department of Education, then maybe things could be different. On the 15th, there was a release of a song of an artist. And we had a joint event, which was an educational artistic event. And we had the representatives from the different municipal departments. So we had Joana there. Luisa Mandela was also there, Joana was there, and we had a lot of different teachers from the municipal and state networks because they believe in this public policy aspect of the Maria Filipa School. When I created the school, I was a public university teacher, and you know how we feel about private schools. So initially, we were saying, oh, this is a private school. I said, fine, but, I need a school for my child. I can't wait I can't wait for public policies to create this kind of space for my daughter, you know, maybe 20 years from now. I have this urgency, and so I need this now. So yes, I had problems with a lot of my colleagues, but a lot of other people embrace this idea.
There are spaces where you get interns from university. You get people who are doing doctorates and masters and so on. That doesn't happen normally in private schools. So it's an initiative that has to have, needs to be joined up to other institutions, because we can't give a false step anywhere, because we want to construct with you. So, you know, it's the fee where it's going to be difficult to pay. But my mum is a domestic worker. She used to sort of like sell meals. I used to sort of like leave school and then get them from my mum and then sell them to the teachers. I used to sell Jello and materials for sewing, lots of different things. And I remembered that in 2020 when I was in this sort of like in a moment of desperation. You know, it's not possible to like sort of live off the monthly fees that we get. So we started doing online courses, selling shirts and cups and mugs and so on, thousands. And so we managed to survive through that. In terms of the calendar, why should a school be why should a school be sort of related to Afro-Brazilian religion when we celebrate the Afro-Brazilian deities and people don't think, oh, it's a Christian school because it celebrates Easter? So once a mother came and said, oh, I came to get to know the school, but I'm a little bit scared because my family is evangelical. And I said, wow, how interesting. Welcome. But is there a problem for you? And I said, there's no problem here. It's not a religion school. We don't have any kind of like religious doctrine here. You know, there was a figure there that was, you know, related to Afro-Brazilian religions, but I said, listen, that's mine, because that's what I follow, but don't. But, you know, sort of jokes aside, a lot of our educators are from Candomblé, the Afro-Brazilian religion, and we need to say, listen, we're talking about Orisha mythology in the same way that we talk about mythologies to do with Christ. And, you know, the resurrection of, you know, like the mythology of, like, the resurrection of Christ, and people get shocked because nobody needs to believe in what it's, you know, if you're Christian and you want to believe that, that's up to you, that's your faith, but, you know, so everything that is religious or could be seen as religious in schools, we put it in in a context of being storytelling. And, you know, of course, we're not going to sort of like shut out any children for their religious beliefs. And while I've been here giving you some sort of like essays about like Afro-culture, but I am somebody who has a lot of hope in this new political movement of networking the different elements of the African diaspora. We've got diversity in all senses of the word. When I talk about diversity, we've had Argentinian teachers from Uruguay, from Guinea-Bissau as well, so that trans teachers as well. We had black, white teachers. We had like male teachers which was really interesting because quite often in primary education we have women because women are seen as being the carers. But no, we wanted to have men there too because it's not just about. We thought it was important for children to see that men can care too. So we began to hire men. And then, but I also thought, okay, let's try and have straight men here. I've got nothing against gay men, but again, they have this idea of being carers, or there's this. So that was our thinking. We had a Mexican child there, and a family from Mexico there. She was a visiting professor who comes periodically to Salvador. And so that child brought a perspective of indigenous peoples from Mexico, which was really important for us. So we construct our school from this huge collective, and we don't obviously abandon any of our brothers and sisters who are from the African diaspora. I think I will respond to your question more because I think the question about the calendar has already been replied. So one of the issues that we still have and that we don't have the answer to, it's our relationship to the rest of the African diaspora in Latin America, not necessarily with the US, because the civil rights movement contaminated, in a good sense, the agenda for Afro-Brazilians. But our relationship with the rest of Latin America is incredibly limited. And I'd like to talk from the point of view of my own area of work, which is literature. So we've got lots of studies and of black American writers. That's the US, I mean, here. And a lot of them have been sort of studied here. So people who work within literature no doubt have studied black US writers, but for black Latin American writers, we don't really know them, certainly not within literature. We know from the Caribbean, we know some of the female writers there. And we know some, Teresa Carga, who's a Cuban writer, and we have quite a good dialogue with her work. Also, we have a connection with African writers who write in Portuguese, but we have very little from Latin America. So there's a reason for this, I think, which it has affected our relationship with the rest of Latin America. It was the black social movement, really, because lots of the African literature that we learnt about, we learnt from the black social movements rather than from academia, because so the knowledge that we do have came from our own research efforts rather than from affirmative actions. So these demands became part of our research. But we have very little knowledge of the black social movements from Latin America. We know them very little. Few black thinkers have come to us here in Brazil. So from Cuba, we have had some exposure to thinkers there, but there's a real gap in our knowledge. And we know that lots of policies, when we talk about the relationships of Brazil with other countries, or lots of political movements or policies come as a result of the demands of society. And so if there's no social demand asking for knowledge from Latin American, then that's not going to happen politically. So these social demands, sooner or later, will turn into policies and public policies. So we have a lot more movement between universities in Brazil and Africa than, say, I'm talking about black students here, of course. So in terms of black students and researchers, we don't have as much movement between Brazilian universities and the rest of Latin America. And we know that theory that's been produced by Latin American writers, very little of it arrives here in Brazil. Yesterday we were at the launch of Carini's book, who also had a professorship at São Paulo University. But the experiences of black Latin American writers don't manage to arrive here, because in some ways Brazil is isolated within Latin America because of the language being Portuguese. But it's not just an issue of the language, because we'd also have problems dialoguing with the US and with Europe. So I think there's another issue going on here, where Brazil is a hegemonic country. But if we fight for them, then things will change as a result of the weight of demand from young people. So I think this could provoke if there is a demand, that could provoke a change. And normally those demands come from social movements rather than academia. For affirmative actions to become public policy, that happen because of the demands of social movements. I think the Brazil we know today will no longer be able to be digested by the students at Maria Filipe's school. And we're going to have to finish here. I don't know how my day is going to be tomorrow, remembering that I was here. Oh, don't forget, we'll have autographs. I'll talk about that in a minute, but just for us to close here our table, not that it's a definitive closure, but looking back at the mirror of Narcissus, which doesn't include our features and our story, we don't see that. It's projected in everybody, we see it in the TV, in our cell phones and so on the streets, but it doesn't reflect us. But you have really helped clean this colonized mirror so that children or people like me or old people who are older than me can make peace with this and imagine new perspectives and new possibilities, and we don't need to lower our heads in the face of racism. So there's no awareness without revering our ancestors, without a commitment to these people who are being born today and those who will come in the future, because we need to know that anti-racism is not just a responsibility for us, black people and indigenous people, but also for white people. So you should meet with white people, and you need to read, though, and observe and discuss so that anti-racism grows. So let's carry on walking this path together. I would like to thank you. It was an honor to be here on this table with you. I'd like to thank you for sort of joining in, and thank you to the Libras interpreters and the other interpreters. I'm not sure what languages they were translating. And thank you also, Sesc, for this opportunity, for conceding this space to us, and for allowing us to have these dialogues that will flourish. And so we will have autographs outside. Oh, no. Autographs here in the auditorium. There's a protocol for her to sign it. What you do is you come. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to sort of hand your book to her to sign, and then ask you to stand behind her so that you can take your photo, so that we are more economical with our time. Thank you very much.
Pessoal, quem quiser autógrafo